Episode of the North South podcast. I'm Dave, and this is
Andrew.
Lovely. This episode we've kind of tentatively titled Why Everything is All Your Fault and That's Okay. And we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants here with this one a little bit because we just think it's a useful topic, whether we delve into it in sort of like academic levels of information or whether we just talk about how it actually practically applies, because it's something that both of us have applied to our own training, and we've also seen where performers apply it and where people who struggle with performance often don't apply it, because there's a lot that you can get from it. So we do need to do a little bit of a catch up though. So what have you been up to over the last week or so, mate? Oh, you've been back on the mats, haven't you?
Sorry, Dave. Repeat that again, mate.
You've
you just cut off me there. Yeah, you just.
That's all right.
Off.
I said you've been back on the mats.
I have. Yeah.
This week.
Well, I've been back for a couple of weeks. For anyone who gives a shit that listens to this, been dealing with some ongoing. Well, fuck me, it's past ongoing at this point. Some ongoing sort of nerve issues, and it has meant that training has been a bit sporadic, for want of a better term. But over the past couple of weeks, I've been reintroducing some element of sort of sport work, so I can generally get away with doing a little bit. And last week, I probably went a bit too hard, and I'm paying the price for it this week. But it is what it is. We're all idiots at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to remind people who you are.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to show up and let the new guys know what the crack is.
Murder the trial class guy. Yeah, so since the last podcast, I finally got my purple belt.
You did?
Yeah. I felt like I should have done the episode with it wrapped around my head, but that would have felt a little bit too on the nose. The main thing is, I'm obviously very appreciative, all the rest of it, but the main thing is I now don't have to have awkward conversations with people when they ask what belt I am.
Yeah, that's that. I am still here. I'm turning my Wi-Fi off my phone because the connection's being shit. It should load back up in a second. There we go.
There he is.
Yeah, it's a long time coming, mate. The worst thing anyone ever said to me was, you're a purple belt now, you're not allowed to be shit anymore. And that just filled me with all sorts of panic and anxiety.
Well, so it was Josh, who is one of my friends and one of my clients, who started at the same time as me, and he's a brown belt, and it's potentially going to be a black belt soon. I don't know what time scale, but he's good. But his exact words were, this person started training at the same time as I did. I was like, oh, fuck, here we go. And I got my blue belt a year before him. And he was like, so this is probably 5 years late. and then promoted me. So, yeah, it was nice. It's nice to get that external validation on all the handshakes.
Yeah. Get a little pat on the back for a little while.
And then everyone try and murder you at open mat afterwards.
Yeah, you've now got that validation, a little bit more validation that you might know what you're talking about as well.
Right, let's not go that far. I mean, my ego validates that to me continually. Yeah. So
it is weird how there's still a part of my brain. No, go on. Sorry. Yeah, carry on. I was going to go on a rant then, but we'll bypass that. I was just going to say, it always. It's a very sort of egotistical thing to do. I'm very aware of this, but you'd be surprised how many times I log onto Instagram and see like a jiu-jitsu page of somebody telling somebody what to do, and then you click on the page and it's like, oh, you're a blue belt, and I'm just like, oh, it's tight that. I'm not sure, but. Yeah, I try and give them the benefit of the doubt anyway. Some of them are quite good, to be fair. There are some good pages out there, but some of them I'm just like, oh, God, it's not quite sat right with me. That I know that's the wrong way to look at it as well, because you could be a perfectly good blue belt and perfectly good at explaining things, but my brain instantly goes, oh, you've not got a fucking clue what you're talking about.
Yeah, course. Well, because that's the hierarchy that we're used to. But then at the same
It
time,
is,
we all
yeah,
know
yeah.
that one black belt who's like, yeah, do this. And you're like, oh,
Yeah,
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 okay,
yeah.
I'll definitely bear that in mind. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
But yeah.
right. So, on to the topic in hand. How is everything all of our fault? And why is that actually a good thing? So, this came off our discussions for the last one where we were talking about how you can take ownership of your training and how that can be useful. And I think this builds off that and also feeds into it because ultimately, I'll start where it became obvious for me. I had some clients compete at competitions, and some of them did well, and some of them lost. And actually, those who lost got more out of the process than those who won because they were hunting for reasons why things had gone wrong. And I tried to help by asking them to send me video and give some feedback. And you also gave some feedback, for example, to Steve, who's got the right mindset around it anyway with the Reap Invitational. And it kind of sparked off this point that there's only so much that is in your control, especially in a sport that, like in life, we could get into that, but especially in a sport that is so chaotic, so complicated, and then you also have a direct resisting opponent, that it's much easier than in a team sport where you could play the game of your life and still lose. You have much more access to what actually did you do wrong, and therefore what can you actually do to make changes in the future. And I think it's a real own goal that some people don't take advantage of that. They see it as a bit of a threat.
Yeah, I think a really important thing to think about when it comes to grappling. Now, this is my big forte, is having a sense of realism, and I think the majority of people, I'd say 95% of the grappling community, aren't as good as they think they are. Myself included. Like, generally speaking, when you compare us to like the top of the game, like let's say we're talking about like ADCC medalists, Gi World medalists. If we're talking about those as the top elite, if you want to use that terminology, 95% of us are generally quite bad in comparison. It's almost like the thing with jiu-jitsu is, if you look at any other professional sports, if you look at Premier League or you look at the Premiership Rugby, Super League, you obviously have a marker to be like, right, I know what that is. That's my marker as to what, and I can understand as that as like, if I played Sunday League with my mates, I understand that I am nowhere near at that capability to play at that level. But in jiu-jitsu, we don't have that barrier. So it creates this like ideology of like, oh, well, they're doing that, so I must do that. Now, this is a really good thing, I think. It sounds like a negative thing, but it's actually a really good thing, because I think it's very freeing in the context of you don't have to worry about it as much. And it sort of fits into this topic really well, because everything then becomes your fault.
Yeah.
Because you're the only variable that matters within the process. Because once you get away from that element of comparison to the top level, everything else under that is within your control.
Yeah.
And it like you said, it getting caught up in the wins and the losses and all this different stuff is important, but it's such a small piece of the puzzle in terms of the context of actually improving as a grappler. And like you said, that the overlying theme of everything is in your control, or everything is your fault, to use the title. But that's a fantastic thing, because it then takes away all the pressure, because you can manage everything that's in your control.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not trying to suggest that there isn't an element of truth to it. Like if you can train 3 times a week and you go to a competition, and as recently happens to some of my clients and friends in the area, Owen Jones turns up and goes, yeah, I'll have a go. There's not a lot that you are going to be able to do about the gap in skill between you and him. However, my point would still be, you can take that video, you can watch what he did, you can watch what you did, and you can see where your mistakes allowed him to do what he was going to do. Because even if it's just the way that you gripped up, even if it's that you reacted the wrong way or gave a classic reaction to something because you didn't know what it was. All of that is useful data for you to go ahead and take and work with. But if you feed this, like, we got into this a little bit earlier before we started recording, but essentially what we're talking about, if we want to sound very clever, is the difference between the internal and external locus of control. So externally, you can't control your opponent. There's nothing you can do about the fact that Owen Jones decides to turn up and do your bracket. But what you can control is how you respond to that. So one, try and just keep thinking he's a human being like anyone else. I'll just go out and do what I can do. Because if you go, oh my God, it's Owen Jones, well, then you've lost. You're fucked. There's nothing you can do about that because you've beaten yourself before you stood on the mat. And at the same time, if you go out and you lose and it isn't a very quick match, the thing that you can do to pull it back under your control is watch the video, see how he did what he did, and work back to, right, so what do I need to work on next? So that if someone were to try and do that to me again in the future, what do I do?
Yeah, for sure. And like, obviously, to give people some information. So obviously, internal and external locus of control is exactly what it says in the tin. The idea is that internal is everything within you, external is everything else, essentially. Now, this is quite a deep topic of sports psychology. This is used quite a lot within the realms of sports psychology. If you speak to sports psychologists or listen to athletes talk, there is generally a lot of grounding surrounding the controllable elements. Like you'll hear comments of like, you'll hear team sports and they'll talk about like, if anyone's played in team sport, we've all been on the end of like a bit of a kick in, and you'll be in a team huddle. Like, it used to happen in rugby quite a lot because obviously after someone scores, you generally tend to get a bit of a team huddle. And you'll always hear this story of like, right, lads, last 30 minutes, let's win these next 30 minutes. Let's control what we can in the next 30 minutes. Obviously, you can't control the scoreline, but you can control how you apply yourself within that time period. This is this idea of like internal versus external locus of control. And there's loads of evidence to suggest the benefit that can come from that in terms of like self-efficacy towards a task. You've got this idea of like challenge versus threat, which is obviously quite intertwined with performance. And there's loads to do with like nerves and things like that, like arousal and how it can impact performers and their application. But the idea essentially is like, how can you create an environment within yourself where your focus is primarily on areas that you can control. So things like Dave has mentioned, things that you can't control. You can't control your opponents, you can't control the referees, you can't control the weather, you can't control the traffic getting to the competition, you can't control the time, you can't control things like that. But you can control your effort. I've spoken about this before because we do a lot of work on this sort of stuff in our classes. Effort, you can control your posture, your attitude, you control your competitiveness. And the idea behind it is obviously, like Dave mentioned, is you can drive loads of feedback from this. So I could match against Gordon Wrighton. Now, I could score a 10 out of 10 in every single area of control. So I could give my most effort, most competitiveness, most attitude. I could be at my technical best and I'll still get filled in. But we can still draw a load of positive behind that. So it's when we're talking about, again, being an individual who maybe, whether you're a full-time competitor or not, or even not even necessarily full-time, whether you're an active competitor is probably a better terminology, because very few people are actually full-time. But we could draw a lot from that because it removes that element of comparison, like we talked about. I'm not looking at, like you said, your clients going against Owen Jones, obviously a very, very good elite level up and coming grappler in the UK. He just qualified for trials. For ADCC, sorry, just won his trials. Like, going into that match thinking, well, this is going to be shit. He's Owen Jones, just won trials, he's going to ADCC, blah, 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 blah. He's, I don't even know how old he is, 18, 20, 19, 20, something like that, like young kid. Like, it's easy to get caught up in that, like, well, what's the point? But the idea behind this is that you can still get a lot out of that even if you're on the unfavourable side of it. Whether it's personally, whether it's technically, whether it's I don't fucking know, like philosophically, whatever you want to fucking, whichever lens you look at it through, there is loads of branches of information that can improve you as a performer.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of 2 points that I wanted to add to that, and one of them is just a broadly philosophical point, in that a lot of this comes from psychology, but actually most of it is rooted in ancient Stoicism. And I know everyone's going to be fucking eye rolling at this stage because it unfortunately, the message of all of that has become very much hijacked by productivity bros who are like, and I love Will's phrase for this where he calls it broicism, and it's like all the bits of stoicism that will make you a business leader or whatever fucking metric you want to use, with none of the soul. Like none of the fundamental understanding, none of the sort of semi-religious stuff and all the rest of it. But CBT and I can't think of the name of the other therapy. There's another ACT. That's it. Thank you. Are rooted in Stoicism, and there's been an awful lot of work between psychology and philosophy to bring this back properly and understand it properly, and it isn't just fucking Ryan Holiday and the everyday Stoicism and all that shite where he just rips stuff off AI and then pretends it's his. Allegedly, there's a very fundamental point that they make, which is the only things that are in your control are your actions and then how you react to the stimulus that comes into you. And that's it. And I think that's perfect for sport because those are the only two things that you can control. How do you react to a situation? And I'm not saying that you can, if you're overwhelmed, you're overwhelmed. You can't choose to act differently. But through your training, you can learn to deal with a little bit more overwhelm each time and still allow something to sit with you and feel uncomfortable. It's like all these old adages we talked about in the last episode where people talk about you've got to get comfortable getting uncomfortable. And that's fundamentally what the point or one of the points that the Stoics made was discomfort is to some extent perceived. Now, I'm not saying that it's the same for everyone. It isn't. And for some people, they will perceive it in a much harsher way than, say, you or I would. And it's not to try and belittle people or denigrate their experience with that. But if part of it is at least influenced by how you perceive it, then that's a good thing because it means that's trainable. And it means that you can take back a little bit of control from something that otherwise is not within your control and try and do what you can with the cards that you've been dealt. So the classic one I always think of is with white belts. And it's like we've talked about before, sometimes some people have got a little bit of fuck you in them and some people haven't. And I think at white belt, one of the best things you can possibly do is make it your aim to keep working if you're in bad positions and try and piss off the person who's rolling with you. If they have to take their third favorite route to submit you, and normally they take their first favorite route, then you know you've improved because you've shut off options to them that otherwise they had access to. If when they go to submit you, you try and fight your way out of a submission in a sensible way, you have improved compared to we all know that person who's great on top, they get swept and then they just go, oh, and then they've lost. And it's like that frustrates me because you're not controlling any controllables there. You're just going, oh, well, I've lost. What's the fucking point? And you've missed out on all this potential.
For sure. There's a lot of...
in terms of what you could control, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of... I think there's many lenses to this topic, actually. I think that you can go down, and when it comes to performance especially, like, you can see wide varieties of this in terms of, like, what it means within context. The layering of complexity can vary, but I think fundamentally the two big things, which we've sort of touched on one, which is first one is like you try and control what you can control is such a massive factor, and the other thing is intent. Now, intent is again such a highly contextual phrase, but it's it's such a vital part of that process as well, in terms of like setting your intentions. Again, like everything is, to go back to the summary, like everything is your fault, and that's a good thing. What we're trying to do within a training process is set intentions. So it's like, what are my intentions? So you can use goals and all this different stuff, like all this different terminology as to why you want to do something or what you want to do. And then you can down regulate that into like, right, this is the overall intention. What can I do within that allows me to control the variables? So an example of this is like, if we use a training example, well, let's say I'm going into a competition class or whatever, a hard sparring session, and my intention is I'm prepping for a competition. My intention is to not get point scored on me from a guard pass, whatever it is. Let's use that as a general example. Okay, so that's my intention. So I know what the intentions are. I've set my stall out. What do I then need to control within that session itself? Like, where do I need to apply myself in the highest level of manner or output in order to achieve those intentions? And again, you could use these examples very sort of like macroly, so like very globally, or very sort of acutely, or on a micro level. And again, it depends on the context. Like we talk a lot. One of my biggest bugbears, it does my fucking head in, is the lack of attention towards preparation from like high level grapplers. I think lower guys have got an excuse. Like, if you're someone who trains 3 days a week and you're prepping for a competition, but you're managing a 50-hour work week, 2 kids, a dog, one of your relatives is unwell, whatever it is, like, the amount of variables the plates that you're spinning are significantly more.
Yeah.
If you're a 26-year-old who is training full time and trying to compete and trying to achieve top level success, there is no justification in the world, as far as I'm concerned, that obviously that's harsh. There obviously are justifications, but that means you aren't doing the extra work. So, like, there's no level of neurodiversity, which is the big common theme in jiu-jitsu at the minute. So I do not care what kind of autism you've got, what kind of ADHD you've got. I don't care what shit your missus is giving you. Like, there is a certain level of requirement that I'd expect as an individual. Like, where you're planning to go to a competition. So we talked about this briefly in the last one, like with trials. If I'm looking at this as like a coach, so if I'm looking at a guy that's going to, if I had one of my guys in my classes that was wanting to go to trials and he was looking like he was at the level of skill set to be able to do that, and it's, well, what do I want to see? Well, do I understand the rule set? Who potentially am I going to be facing? What's my strategy timing wise? Do I understand the scoring system? Do I understand the weight categories? Am I in a good position to make the weight? All this shit, am I physically prepared to do the work? Am I technically prepared to do the work? Where's my, I don't know, strategy involving all those things involved that goes into it? And unfortunately, with jiu-jitsu, if you look at, like, I don't know, rugby again, if we go to rugby or football, in a week, you'll play a game at a weekend, and then the rest of that week will be, right, preparing for the next game, dissecting what went wrong, what do we need to adjust, how can we address that from a training perspective, how can we improve from a performance perspective or a skill perspective in that meantime, how can we tighten up on certain things. Unfortunately, in jiu-jitsu and grappling, you have to do all that yourself, because most of us don't have coaches that will do the job for you. So you have to do all that yourself. So there's a big
and that's what
burden.
we mean.
That there's a big burden on you as an individual.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's what. you finish it. It's okay.
No. Obviously, that's like a big burden on an individual. It's a lot of work to do, and it is difficult. It is not easy. But this is that idea: is that one thing that you talk about a lot is this. There's a lot of excuses that come with competing in jiu-jitsu. and it's always a case of like, oh,
Yeah.
well, I ended up losing to the eventual winner, or this went wrong, or that went wrong, or this went wrong. I didn't eat enough, and it's like, yeah, that they are perfectly valid reasons, but it's your fault that it's happened, and it's down to you now to not let that happen again.
Yeah, and I think so. The one of the ones that I like is that, oh, I lost the eventual winner. Well, yeah, of course you fucking did. Statistically, one of the people in that bracket had to. So that doesn't mean anything. Like, it just is what it is. The sport is two enter, one person wins. Like, what did you want from that? And then the point that I made when I did that meme post about it was, while those things might be true, you're often seeking, because we're emotional creatures, and that's perfectly normal, whether we like to admit that we're emotional creatures or not, like aka Gordon Ryan, who pretends he's the most rational, logical man in the world and then has tantrums on the internet about women's sport. As an example, it's you have to accept that those you might be reaching or overselling aspects of what went wrong because they're more psychologically palatable to you. You can cope with that, because what happens when you go and compete is you've got this mental model in your head of who you are, how you compete, what you do. And then when you go and do a sport, and it's where sport is so exciting and interesting and why people want to do it, is you get to see whether that reality is true or not. And more often than not, when you lose, you're uncomfortable and you find it difficult and awkward because your conception of reality, I'm a great grappler, has been shattered because you lost. And so what you have to then do is recognize, am I reaching for these as reasons why I lost? Because I want something soothing for that pain, that feeling inside of, fuck, I'm not who I thought I was. Or can you take a step back, accept that discomfort as part of the process, live with it, and use it for something? Like, oh, I'm not fucking letting that happen again. Or I lost and it's because I didn't prepare properly. Well, fuck that. I'm going to sit down and write a plan on how I'm going to prepare, and I'm going to go and talk to my coach about it. Or do you just go, well, it just wasn't my day. And then you walk away, you don't improve, you don't get any better, and you continue to be the same grappler 15 years' time, where you've got a few more moves in the bag, but fundamentally, if you're put in certain situations, you do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah,
and I think
it's a
for
very...
me, like,
sorry, Dave.
Well, it's realising what motivates you. The more that I work in this area and the more I chat to you about it and others, the more I realise that I am a horrible, spiteful little man, and that actually, no matter how much I try and step away from that, I am actually largely fueled by spite. Like at white belt, I just made it my mission of, I want to see that little fuck off face that people pull when they're like, wait, get fucked. How are you doing? This is bullshit. You fell for that last week. And if that isn't enough for you to drink in, then I don't understand how you make it past white belt. Like, that was literally the only thing that kept me going, was seeing that little, fuck you. You know, there's just little glint in their eye. And although that's petty, and although that's not necessarily going to make you the best performer in the world, you need to find whatever your equivalent of that is, so that you can use that as a kind of marker of how do you improve in a situation where so little is in your control. What is within your control? Well, for me, what was within my control was go and learn the things that will irritate them. Like, what have they done to me? Oh, they repeatedly get me in mount. Okay, well then I'm going to go and get Jiu-Jitsu University and find out how to sit in mount in a way that means it doesn't hurt. That'll age me, Jiu-Jitsu University. But if you're not... I think most people are petty enough and spiteful enough to go and do that. And therefore, that's a useful thing to do. And I think sometimes people factor that out. They think that like, we talked about this earlier, people think elite performers are somehow magically different or better because they engage in certain behaviors. And you look at, like, the elite, the people who are the best of the literal best, you know, who no one even comes close to. And very often they're not okay, like mentally, because they're repeatedly engaging in behaviors that allow them to perform well, but aren't actually necessarily that great for them, indulged to the level that they have to have the level of success that they have. And that's not true for all of them. We can probably name a couple within sport who don't fall into that category, but it's a case of sport reveals to you, if you allow it, especially our sport, what the reality of the situation actually was. And you can either cope with that reality by getting upset and rolling out the platitudes and, he was just so strong, it must have been steroids, I didn't eat the right breakfast, or whatever fucking bollocks you want to tell yourself. Or you can sit and go, right, I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes crying my way through my match, the video that I took of my match, and then I'm going to watch it again and again, and I'm going to ask someone else to watch it, and I'm going to get over the fear of showing it to someone else who I respect and asking for their opinion. And then I'm going to try and integrate some of their suggestions into my training. Because as far as I see it, those are your two options. You can either cope, or you can see it as data to get you better. And one of those is in your control, and one of those is just a sort of reaching mechanism to just go, it's fine, I don't have to make myself better. I don't have to... I can soothe this discomfort a different way, and it's fine.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Sorry.
Like, I think the elite performer thing is a really interesting thing to touch on, because, especially in the context of this conversation, because, again, like you said, what we try and do is we try and look at elite performers and see what makes them different. But quite a lot of the time, the things that make them different are very minute. It's the things that are similar that we tend to miss. So, like, yes, there obviously will be differences, and these differences, we might be talking like fucking fiber type percentages. We're talking like neural responses, like shit that's like there's nothing you can do about. Basically, look at your parents and call them knobheads, because they're the reason why you're not the same. But what a lot of the similarities are is using topics like we're talking about today, and they're just applying them within their life. So it's like things that they can control. Well, if you've got an elite performer, they often talk about like sacrifice. So we look at sacrifice, and what does that mean? Well, what they're actually doing is they just don't go out and have 10 pints at a weekend, because they know that that's not going to be beneficial from a recovery standpoint. They typically eat a diet that is conducive with performance and recovery, because they know that they can control that. They watch their tape back, or they have a good understanding of a feedback system. So they understand that it's not the success or the failure, but it's the information that allows them to then get better. These are things that we can all apply within our lives. Yes, we don't have to do them as neurotically as somebody who's training to be an Olympian or is training to win a Champions League or whatever it is. But the principles apply to us all. We just have to find the context in which we apply them to ourselves. Like, one of my big bugbears in grappling, again, I know you're sort of focusing a little bit more on the hobbyist side of things, and I keep touching on a bit more on the guys that are trying to be elite. But one of the things that is a massive bugbear for me is, why the fuck do professional or elite level grapplers think that they can skip this process? You look at any other elite level sport, and they're doing all this stuff. They're looking after their recovery. They're eating the right foods. They're dealing with their mental health, their psychology. They're strategizing. They're physically prepared. Why the fuck do grapplers think that they can bypass that? Why on earth do they think they're an exception to the rule? Like, if you want to... fuck knows. I can't even think of an example. It's annoying me that much. But if you want to... Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think it's the relative youth of this as a sport. So it's only in our lifetimes that rugby union and rugby league have started doing stuff like this. It's only in, I don't know, probably the last 40, 50 years that they've started to do this properly in football. And these are big money sports where the results matter in terms of they influence the lives and livelihoods of a lot of people in the way that grappling really doesn't. Yeah. You see the same thing with... Like, we like to think that grappling is the center of the universe. I really liked that. I don't know if you heard it ages ago. Matt Benyon was on the Raspberry 8 podcast, and they were talking about the popularity of the sport and the fact that it had grown, and that was very cool. But they had a discussion around how popular is the sport actually, and Matt, being a person who sells goods in this area and being very good at his job, was like, "Oh no, it's not big at all." And the discussion was, "Oh no, but it's getting bigger. It's getting bigger." He was like, "Yeah, we don't even make skateboarding numbers. Like, I know what Tatami make, and I know what we make, and combined, we ain't even doing that well. Like, in a by comparison to other sports level." And I think sometimes we get caught in that bubble of, especially within combat sports, it's only recently that you see mixed martial artists taking this seriously. Like, I started watching all of that in like 2009, and it was a fucking wing and a prayer back then.
Oh yeah, it's still a Wild West as well.
Yeah, to a certain level, I think. And then you're seeing more and more people realize that that's a thing that they need to take care of, because it at a certain level of competition, it becomes a given. And that isn't necessarily always the case in grappling, because it hasn't needed to be. And I think that's something I think we're seeing that change in the last 5 or 6 years, kind of in real time. I'd say just before COVID and just after COVID are these points where we're seeing these growing pains and this development. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, this belief that you can just go in and go, "Oh, I'm just better than all of that."
Yeah. And like, it really, maybe I'm just a sad bastard, but like, it just, and it's obviously very, very difficult, because we've got, the majority of gyms are amateur gyms, and you might have 1 or 2 guys within a gym that are looking to push that level or are capable of pushing that level. So it becomes very difficult. It's very difficult for a head coach to oversee that for everybody. But then it becomes a case of like, well, if you're the 1 or the 2, how are you, again, general team topic, how are you controlling what you can control? Like, is it a case of just being like, you speak to your head coach and you're like, "Hey mate, do you mind if I do this, this, and this within the sessions?" Like, most gyms have got a period of time where it's like, right, 10 5-minute rounds. Can you have a conversation with people in your gym and go, "There's 4 lads here. Do you mind if you help me out with this? Because this is what I'm going to work on." Like, is it like, whether you're looking for ADCC, I don't know, like the amount of training you can come up with based on an ADCC rule set and format. I'm not just talking, "Oh, you can now do heel hooks." I'm talking strategic training, positional training, like scoring training, all this different stuff is, and I think on a caveat, I think we're starting to see that
table and chairs by the sides of the mat.
Yeah, just like basic shit. Like, it ain't. I think we're starting to see this. Like, a lot of the guys from Europe are obviously talking about, is it Dimir, something like that? Like, I don't know. There's a few guys, like, I think Taylor Perman, Joseph Chen, a few guys have been working with him. And all he's doing is creating training environments for good level grapplers. Like, it's probably the shit that should have been. I think we'll see a big emergence of this because professional grapplers or guys that are looking to push that level suddenly will realize stuff that, like, I mean, I not to blow my own trumpet, but I've been banging on about this stuff for fucking years now, but nobody knows who I am, so nobody gives a shit what I have to say. But like, suddenly Joseph Chen goes, "Oh, this guy's actually planning my training for me," and everyone goes, "Oh, right, well, we should all do that as well." And it's just like, fucking hell, lads. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, but again, like, the thing that I think, like, obviously it helps for us, for the job that we do, is because we watch a lot of other sports and like how other sports navigate things. So it's easy for us to be like, well, hang on, like, I mean, like you said, rugby have been doing this for 20 years now. Football have been doing it for 40 years or whatever it is. Like, and it's easy to go, well, why are we not doing this? But again, the problem with jiu-jitsu is it takes somebody very good to then go, "Oh, I've been doing this," and everyone goes, "Oh, well, maybe I should do that as well." It's like, fucking hell, lads, like, banging our heads against the wall here for fucking however many years talking about this stuff. Like, it's like the sort of, obviously, again, we used to talk, Greg Sams with the stuff, like, obviously, one of his lads has just qualified for ADCC now. He just won trials in America, and everyone's now going, "Oh, ecological approach." It's like, fuck me. Oh my God. Like, there's so many people who've been talking about this. Obviously, Greg does a fantastic job of getting the message out, and his content and stuff is probably better than 90% of the people in the space. But there are other people who've been talking about this sort of stuff. It's just, people refuse to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Or don't want to pay attention to it because Craig Jones says this, or Gordon says this, or Danaher says this, and everyone goes, that must be the way to do it. Obviously, Greg's in the position now where he's got like 2 or 3 guys that are really sort of pushing that level. Obviously, there's still a large, like, again, not to be that guy, obviously, and like we talk about a lot on this podcast, but like there are still other people winning trials. It's not one person's won trials. There are other guys still winning trials. So you can't like go like this is the only way to do it. But obviously, it's a really good job of promoting the message and proving that there are other ways to do things as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's frustrating as well because if we look at it from the position of like, especially guys in the UK, let's say you suck at wrestling, why would you not go and visit Carlson Gracie Hull? Or
Cam.
We could list a wide variety of other people that you and I both know who are very very, very good. But what I mean is, if you knew no one else, why would you not go, oh yeah, Owen Livesey's pretty good at stand-up. Maybe I should spend a couple of weeks there. Or why would you not go, if you're shit at leg locks, why would you not go, oh, I wonder if they'd let me drop in down at Owen O'Flanagan's place? Like, it just, I don't understand where people can't see the potential solutions. Because as long as you're not a twat of a training partner, and as long as you don't go, oh, I'm going to take this and make an instructional of it, we're not at that stage now where maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just being naive. But I can't see, as long as you're not a dickhead about it, them saying, no, you can't come and train here. Because ultimately, all of you who are pushing for that level are on exactly the same road, especially in the UK. Like, do you think Owen doesn't understand what it's like to be one of the few people treating it professionally and taking that approach? Either Owen, whether it's Northern Owen or Southern Owen. And that they wouldn't take time out of their day to try and help someone else. Like, I think there's an awful lot more goodwill in this sport in that respect, and people just don't take advantage of it. Like, on a smaller scale, Steve, who works with me, is very lucky, one, that his coach Sam is happy for him to train all over, but he's also lucky that he's like a thoughtful training partner. He's a difficult role, and he's like polite and pleasant and doesn't just do the traditional heavyweight thing of smashing everyone, physically trying to hurt people in the room. And so when he goes and visits places, like he's been down to Nottingham MMA with Shane and his team, they're like, oh yeah, come back. Like, we like you here. And I think obviously when you get to a certain level, that probably changes. But like Shane used to go and train up at Lloyd Cooper's. If you're shit at leg locks, why would you not go to Lloyd Cooper's? I just don't. It doesn't make sense to me that people aren't seeing these easy controllables of just go to a room where they do the thing that you suck at and live there for a bit.
And it is interesting
if you can afford to.
Yeah, and obviously, like, people have got like, it's very. There's a lot of the fucking general theme of our podcast is there's obviously a lot of nuance to it. Like, we are talking generally here. Like, we're not. The idea of this whole conversation is, if you're listening to this and then you go, well, I can't do that because I've got my kids at the weekend. The whole point of this conversation is not to say you have to do this. It's where along that spectrum of application can I find an entry point? That's the whole point. It's not, if you're shit at leg locks, I have to go and train with Owen O'Flanagan. Because obviously for us, he lives in London. Not everyone can afford a fucking jiu-jitsu training trip that involves £100 train ticket, £100 in a night in a hotel. But it's like a case of like, can I go and watch his matches? Has he got an instructional? Whether we could talk about instructionals and all that sort of shit, but like, where's that? Can I start going into my training room and being like, do you mind if you put me in saddle? And you just try and heel up me, and I'll just try and work out. Like, where is your entry point of like control? That's the whole point of this conversation. It's not a roadmap of you must do this, you must do that, you must do that. It's like, well, what's the ideal scenario? What's the ideal? So if I wanted to get really, really good training partners, the ideal solution is, well, I'm just going to book a ticket to Texas and go and train at B Team. But I don't have.
Yeah, exactly.
like I've still got to work and all this sort of shit. But it's like, well, where can I take steps along that to find my entry point of like a little bit better? Maybe it is you just go to an open mat. Like there's a Northwest Open mat at Stealth that's held once a month up here, which is fucking brilliant. You get like 150 people on a mat. You get a range of levels, like black belts down to fucking white belt to new beginners. There's an entry point for everybody in that room. So it's like, maybe that's just your entry point. Like, where does it come from? Like, where's your next? Again, like we talked about, like last week in terms of, sorry, not last week, last podcast in terms of like taking ownership. But it's that idea of like, well, where's my entry point of control? What can I do to make? Like, we had a chat. We have a no-gi group for the classes that I teach, and it was like, if you've got any questions, because we're to give context, we're looking to take quite a few guys to competition a little bit more this year. So we're starting off with there's a Grappling Industries in June that we're going to try and take a few people down to, and it was like, obviously, if you've got any questions, then use the coaches. Like, ask away. I will answer any question you've got. But I also was like, but if it's a question that's an easy answer for you to find, don't be shocked if you get met with a snotty answer, because at the end of the day, you're an adult, and I'm not going to fucking spoon feed you. So it's like that's what we're talking about.
How do I escape side control?
Yeah. Like, go if it's a genuine question, I will help to the best of my ability. But if it's something that you could have quite easily gone and found and saved yourself time, energy, you've actually applied yourself in a manner, then that's what it's like. That's when we need to look at an intervention in terms of like, well, what is it you're actually controlling here?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes people, to go back to that point about this sport being on level with skateboarding or whatever in the level of popularity, it's also relatively new. And so as a result, we haven't got these structures and things around us, or if we do, they stand out. So for example, you go to a Gracie Barra and you're not wearing the right gi and they tell you to get fucked. That stands out as a situation that you find yourself in. Let's say you're away for business and you're trying to find somewhere to train. You will be shocked how nice every other gym will be about having you down to come and train, because why wouldn't they? And I think that still kind of pervades our sport, even at the higher levels, that a lot of those guys, especially in the UK, who have struggled to find necessarily the same quality of training partner and people thinking about the sport in the same way, they'll value someone else being on that same path, even if they're further behind on it, in terms of you just ask for some of their time, or you pay to go to one of their seminars, or you turn up and do one of the open mats, or whatever it is that you're capable of doing. Like, to give a ridiculous example, within strength and conditioning, I was a late starter and I haven't done a degree in it. And what I basically spent lockdowns asking questions, sensible questions, to the coaches whose books I'd read on Instagram. And like, there's one in particular, Mladen Jovanovic, who could not have been more kind with his time, considering how fucking stupid some of the questions I was asking was. And I was just polite about it and just went, yeah, I'm probably being really stupid here, but I can't get my head around it. And I'm not saying that you're going to get that level of access to athletes who've made it or whatever, but as long as you are polite and thoughtful, you'll be surprised at how much support there is there for you if you're not a dick about it.
And this is also worth saying as well, I should add a caveat to this. Don't take the fucking piss with your questions. Like, what Dave is explaining is very nice and good people will happily give you their time. But don't take the piss if they're doing a job as well. Yeah. That's worth saying, sorry, on top of this.
Yeah.
Because I get some questions. And as soon as you go, well, we could chat about it. I'll give you some general advice, but let's book a consultation. They go, nah. And it's just like, well... I've got... Like, there is...
Yeah.
But, like, I agree with you. Like, I mean, I'm slightly more neurotic than you. You're generally quite good at communicating with people. I'm not the best communicator. I'm a bit more of a, well, I'll just fucking try it and just see what happens kind of person. But like again, we'll use the general theme of the podcast. You've got to find solutions that work best for you. And that means that you might have to reach out, and if that is the case, it's like comes at that point of like, well, maybe you start with, "Hey mate, how much would it be for an hour of your time?" Like, and you offer the service. Most people will answer your questions wholeheartedly without an issue. There is a very,
to be honest, that's generally what I do now. Is I offer people like money for their time as coaches, and I'm surprised at how often that then results in someone going, "Oh no, don't worry about it. We can just talk about it." But if 100%. You open with, "Answer this question for me," then they might be like, "Ah, well, book a." And you and I have both experienced that. When you've got kids to feed and a mortgage to pay, there's only so much help that you can dole out for free without it starting to take the piss. You know, when someone starts going, "Oh, well, should I structure my session this way or this way?" I'm like, well, maybe pay me and I'll give you the answer, because otherwise I'm just doing work for free.
Yeah, there's a very fine line to strike, and it was a bit of a caveat. It just made me think. But like Dave said, there is a lot of like you said, if it's a technical issue, maybe, again, I've never done this, but like, let's say you're having a leg lock issue. Obviously, I'm speaking for him here, so apologies, Owen, if this isn't the case. But like, let's say you're having a leg lock issue, right?
That's because Andrew's never had a problem with leg locks.
Well, yeah, I've been fucking finished by a few of them. But let's say you're having an issue. I've no doubt that, like, if you sent Owen a message and was just like, "Hey mate, I'm having this issue. Here's a video of me getting stuck in a live round. What do you think my intervention could be?" And I've got no doubt, I'm sure he'd answer the question quite easily. And it's or if not, you just pay a fucking consultation fee and he'll walk you through it. Do you know what I mean? Like, there is some or widely.
You message him with all of that, and you just say, "What instructional do you cover this in? Do you have one, or can you recommend an instructional where someone deals with this issue?" And they go, "Oh, yeah, okay." And suddenly you're not expecting the person to solve that problem for you. You're just asking for some guidance on
that's
I know what this is the information that I need.
Yeah. And it's just like you said, but like I think just slightly getting off track, but like the overlying messages that people in this community are exceptionally nice and pleasant and helpful, and will ask questions and be honest with their time, but at the same time remember that these people have got to make a living, and there's also got to be an element of like a big thing for me is like, I've sponsored a few guys, and like sometimes it can be like pulling teeth, and you're like, well, why you're getting my time for free. I couldn't give a shit if you just took gold at Empire. Like, I could not give a fuck. So it's like, well, obviously you want them to do well, but like, it's a relationship. So how are you managing that relationship? And that goes for like whether you're reaching out for somebody for help. Ed Ingemels has been a great contact for me over the last couple years from like a coaching standpoint. But one of the great things about Ed is he'll never communicate with you like he's the expert. It's always like, he'll always just talk to you like you're an equal, which has been fantastic, because I think sometimes in this game, one of the issues I have with people is people's egos. So I really struggle communicate with people who think they're better than me. So especially in the coaching world, we probably deal with a lot of egos. And I've talked about certain coaches to you, which you will know, who've sort of took the piss, who perceive themselves to be better, even though we do the same job and have got the same experience with the same athletes. Anyway, that's a topic for another day. But like, Ed, for example, to use the example, has never talked to me like he's the expert. He's always treated me as an equal from a coaching perspective, has always valued ideas from both sets of people. A lot of good people within these spaces will be like this. Fuck me, we've gone well off topic here. Anyway,
no, but I think that's the point. Is that is also within your control. We live in an age where you have so much access to, especially in our sport, where most athletes don't have someone else managing their social media for them. You have access to these like great minds of our sport. If you have a specific question, if you are polite about it, if you can show that in some way you have already done something, as in, oh, I was watching your instructional and I don't quite understand X, people will be very kind with their time. And as long as you don't take the piss with that, it is in your control to go and ask. If you don't have anyone in your gym who can answer that question, it is within your control to ask someone on the internet. Yeah. And yes, of course, you need to then make sure that it's someone who isn't shit. So maybe be careful with, say, areas where you don't know who people are, like Reddit. But if you go and ask an actual person, even if it's just, I'm really sorry, I'm struggling with this, which instructional do you have that covers this? Well, who doesn't want to make a fucking sale? And it's win-win, because you probably would have gone and tried to buy that thing anyway. Now you know at least you're buying the right one to cover it. And some of us are lucky enough to have friends who are already in that situation, like, oh yeah, you want X, or I recommend this one and that one, or whatever, and just watch minute 43 to minute 52 or whatever it happens to be, who can do that for you. But not everyone is fortunate enough to have that. And I think sometimes a lot of very good grapplers have also done the same thing, where they started out at a gym where they weren't really getting all of the answers that they wanted. And they had to, that forced them to start looking internally and finding solutions for themselves. So they will appreciate the fact that someone else is trying to find the solution for themselves. If you just go, oh, what do I do from this position?
Yeah.
You might not get as helpful an answer, or, you know, or just send us your instructional for free, or like there is a problem with people thinking that just because you have access to someone, you can somehow be familiar with them. You don't know them. They don't know you. So be polite, be thoughtful, assume you're being a massive fucking inconvenience. Like, honestly, if we're talking about like special skills, with yours being realism, mine is probably preemptively out politing the person before they've even had the thought about how much of a twat I am in their head. And it allows you to navigate a situation that's otherwise quite awkward, because it shows that you've already thought about the fact that it's awkward. So you just go, I'm really sorry. I appreciate you're probably very busy. I just wanted to know if you've got an instructional that covers this area, because I know that you do it well in competition. One, it shows you've watched their matches, which no one will complain about who's in this sport. Two, it shows that you've done your homework and you've tried to figure it out. And three, you're not asking for them to just answer your question. You're asking potentially for a sale, or they might even say to you, oh no, don't worry about it, here's X. They might not, but if you go in assuming that you're going to have to spend a bit of money, as an example, you've managed the controllables, because you are offering a better solution, and then that person can decide whether they want to make a sale or whether they just want to answer your question for you. Whereas if you just come in and ask, oh, I just want this answer, then it's in their court to go, oh, do I actually want to answer that or not? Or do I just go, you know, like, again, another coach that we know who just puts buy program, run program, whenever he gets any questions about any of his programs. And there's something to be said for that as well, when people are taking the piss. But we live in an age where we have unfettered access to each other on the internet. You can use that negatively, or you can use that positively. And I don't think Craig Jones, as an example, gives a shit if you ask him a question like, which do you think he reads? Your comment on his post going, oh, good one, Craig, or you actually asking a genuine question by direct message and accepting the fact that it might make 6 months before you get a reply.
Yeah.
Like, one of those seems... Yeah.
And it is difficult. But again, it's that, like you said, it's what you're doing fundamentally is finding that access point of control. And again, we talked about this, like, in terms of like ownership in the last episode, but you're finding that access point of control that you can manage. So is it a case of, like, again, instructionals, if you want to, people, so for some people they're good for some people and bad for others, but it's like, well, where does that entry point be? Like, for me, I'm not a massive instructional fan, just because I've got the attention span of a fucking 3-year-old. So like, but like matches, matches. I can watch matches. So for me, it's like if there's a certain aspect of the game that I want to delve into. So obviously from like a coaching perspective, so a big thing for me coaching wise is like, well, what are the good guys doing? So what's going to trickle down really well into coaching, and where can I find entry points into session planning to provide them the opportunity to work to that. So I'll watch a lot of matches. So like say for example, over the last 12 months of like, I don't know, who's number ones or like trials or whatever it is. And it's like, well, what are people doing? What's successful? If it's like a big thing's happened, let's say, I'm trying to think of a big thing that's happened in jiu-jitsu. Let's say, I don't know, it was a while ago, but let's say when what's his face beat Tynan in the gi. What's he called? Gomez. Yeah. So it's like, well, you're watching that and it's like, what was happening for the why did he win? How did he win? What was the mechanism that he won by? Now, obviously, in that match, it was a very fine margin of, I think it was an advantage. There was no points scored, I don't think. But it's like, well, how can we draw information from that match that arguably one of the best gi players in the world, well, probably the best pound for pound gi player in the world in Tynan, lost a match? How, why, what happened? Was it a technical thing? Was it a strategic thing, which it probably turned out to be, because I can't remember his first name. His last name's Gomez. How did he manage the pace? How was he managing the gripping battle? Like a lot of what I do with students is like the game model stuff. So we use the game model. It's like, where does that fit in and how can I apply that to a training environment? So I'm using that. I'm not sitting down and going, because I obviously don't teach technique. So me watching instructional is pointless for me to relay into students, because I'm not watching technique. What I need is live footage to build training plans around, because I can go then like, well, this is working, this is working, this is another variation of that contextual principle or heuristic or invariant. How can I build a training program about that? How can I guide students to make those sort of decisions? How can, again, using ecological terms, how can I draw awareness to that perceptual information? How can I create these scenarios or constraints to see an emerging behavior, whatever it fucking is? But like, that's that entry point. Again, like you using that element of control. Now, it's the level from a coaching perspective might be like, well, I need to go and seek out him and feel him do it. Like, I need to see how he manages that distance. I want to see how he wins that gripping battle. Like, and you build a plan around that. But like, there's always an entry point of control in terms of what you can do. Like, where's that entry point? And the thing I like about controllables is they're adjustable.
Yeah.
So like, it's like a big pet hate for me in the fitness world is the idea of non-negotiables. Like, I really don't like that term, because everything's negotiable as a human. Like, doing 10,000 steps is not a non-negotiable, because I can just do 8,000 and not do any more. Like, it's not non-negotiable. It's always a choice to do that thing. So it's like, but then again, that is elements of control. So if you're looking at a intention or a goal or a target, what are the things that I need to control in order to do that? Whether it's weight loss, whether it's strength gain, whether it's health, whether it's a health related to do you know what I mean? Like, if somebody's got, obviously I don't work within this, but if someone's got diabetes, for example, it's up to them to manage their insulin and their glucose and all that sort of stuff. Like, the intervention of controllable mechanisms are present within all variables of health, exercise, sport, performance, work, business, life, all this shit. It's just you're finding different entry points of control that you can handle that allow you to progress in some way, whether it's building a better fucking relationship with your kids or it's just a case of doing better at work, whatever the context is.
Yeah. I think the kind of one of the points that I wanted to make that's probably going to draw it towards an end or towards a close, sorry, is the reason that this is so useful is as soon as you start to become more honest with yourself about what is within your control and what isn't within your control, you can start to be more realistic about why you're choosing or not choosing to do the things that you are choosing to do. And that's absolutely fine. So, like, when people go, oh, well, I don't know, I could be a competitor, but I can't train 6 days a week. You're like, yeah, that's a perfectly legitimate thing. If you've got it, let's say it's probably not a bad thing that your relationship with your kids and your marriage are more important to you than training 6 nights a week and, going and competing at the Mundials or ADCC or whatever you choose. I know it's not the Mundials anymore, but that was what we always used to joke about in the gym. And it's recognizing that what the trade-offs actually are. Like, oh, actually, I'm not willing to make the level of sacrifice that athletes are, and that's okay. And I don't think there is anything wrong with that, as long as you're being honest about that with yourself. It's when people think, oh, I should be at that level, but I'm not willing to make any of these sacrifices. It's like, well,
100%.
no, that's just not how this works. And at the same time, thinking I need to be making these sacrifices, but actually not seeing the damage or the trade-off that inherently has is kind of the problem as well. Like, these guys go, oh, I train this many hours a week and I've still got time for my kids. And there are people out there who do, and they're fantastic at it. And that fits their context and they've built their life around it. And that was the understanding when they got married. And there are people out there who do this very, very well. I think sometimes there are also people out there who are probably a few weeks away from divorce, or will have kids when they're old who are like, you were a twat when we were a kid, Dad.
Yeah.
And you don't know that until it happens if you're not self-aware. So recognizing these things for what they are and controlling what you actually can control and being honest with yourself about where your controllables happen to lie is actually quite liberating, because it lets you be honest with yourself about, oh yeah, what's going to happen here. Like, so a coach that we know did a thing about, and it was just for engagement. We had a really good conversation off the back of it, but did a thing about, how many times a week should you train if you want to compete? I think it should be three a minimum. I was like, I don't give a shit. Don't train at all. You can go and compete. You just pay money and you turn up. It's your expectations need to be different. So if you're training once a week, your expectation is, well, I'm going to go and get a bit of data about how I got my shit pushed in, which is a good thing, because then you can be like, right, well, why did I lose? Okay, here's some things to work on. But if you're going into that not training at all and going, I'm going to be fucking Craig Jones, I'm going to win this whole thing and get double gold, and then you're just, because you're not being realistic about the controllables, you're not being realistic with yourself about the reality of the situation. And that's where people then fall for, oh, it wasn't my day, oh, it wasn't, the ref didn't like me or whatever. It's easier to find those as appealing because you were never being realistic with yourself in the first place.
100%.
So yeah, I think it's important that you consider where your entry point is, and that was the point that you've been making nicely.
Yeah, it's just like you said. It's like you said that, and this is why it's often when we talk about things like this, these are just simply sort of tools to use within a wider picture. They're like being more aware of your controllables is simply just an intervention that you can apply within a context of life. Having understanding of that wider picture is also important, like you said, like understanding the expectation of realism. Like, an interesting conversation I have with a mate of mine who trains is like, he's been going to a few open mats, and he's a good grappler, but like he'll often say like he'll be sort of equal on a skill level with a person, but he'll like lose out in the round because he just doesn't give enough of a shit about winning and losing. And but that's like an important thing, because he's obviously a good level guy, but he'll go against other good level guys where their whole life revolves around success or loss at an open mat, and he's just like, I just do not care enough to push that extra 10%. And he's obviously very aware of that.
Yeah.
And like we talk about this, like in terms of like our lives in like back in the day when I was like a blue belt sort of purple belt level, like on a Saturday night, we used to go to the gym at like 8 o'clock and we just not fuck out of each other. Whereas now it's like, I'm a bit older. I'm certainly more banged up physically. Like, I just don't. I'd rather just like go and sit with my missus and eat some food and have a nice time. Or like on a Sunday afternoon, it's like, do you want to go to this open mat? Well, it's like, well, I can't. I've got to go to the football because I want to go watch the football. Like, it's you are making just conscious choices, but again, it's understanding that cost. So it's like, yes, the person who trains a little bit more probably will do better, but I'm okay with that because I'm doing the things that I want to enjoy. I want to see my missus. I want to go watch the footy. I want to, do you know what I mean? Like that. I want to go see my mates. Do you know what I mean? That's an important aspect. But again, I'm just, again, that this other element of control is you're just controlling your expectations of what you're going to get out of it. Understanding that person that pushes a little bit more is probably going to get a little bit more out of it and might get that edge in an open round. But fundamentally, do I care about it? Like, not particularly. Like, in the grand scheme of things, like, and again, it's understanding that broad picture of why do you want to do something, and then that'll give you that. Again, that's your intention. It's like, what is my intent to get out of this? Is my intent just to enjoy training, feel healthier? Not that you feel healthier when you're training jiu-jitsu, because generally you just sore as fuck all the time. But like, am I training to be a bit healthier, a bit more robust? Like you said, do more difficult things. You've got that philosophical side of things. You've obviously got the mental health side of things. Whatever it is that's your reason for doing it. And then once that's your overlying reason, then it's like, all right, well, like, it's easy for me to manage my expectations. I can control everything within that remit. Like, again, like it's
and then what controllables, what lead to that overarching outcome or reason for doing it that you're looking for is. So if you, I'm going to butcher this quote, but the idea that if what you actually want to achieve is what you actually want to achieve, but the processes and controllables, the things that you could control that you haven't put in place, if it means that you don't ever achieve the thing that you say you want to achieve, then actually that's just a preference. It's not a part of your. I think it's Kierwen and Flack talking about culture, and that actually the bit where people fall down is, oh, I want to be ADCC world champion. Okay, right then. So what are you building to get towards that? What's your like structure of training? What are your goals for this week? What are your goals for the month? And how are you controlling your sessions? What are you doing in this week and that week? And if you don't know that, does your coach know it?
Yeah,
and that's,
it's like a really good way of, probably a really. What we'll do is, I've got an idea, Dave. We'll give some practical feedback. Now, as we talked about, some coaches are really nice, and we'll give you stuff away for free. So we're going to do that. If you've made it this fucking far, you've done well. So I'm going to give you some guidance for free. You've earned it. Okay. So a really easy way of doing this is, first and foremost, obviously, like we talked about, is set an intention. So have a real good think about what is it you want to get out of training. Now, obviously, myself and Dave can't really give you life advice because we're not life coaches. We can't really give you relationship advice because that's for you to handle. So we'll talk specifically about training. So a really good way to do it is, first and foremost, have a real good think about what is it you want to get out of training. Is it you want to be ADCC world champion? Is it that you just want to get better at jiu-jitsu? Pick your reason why. The next thing to do is to assess. So you've got an intention, okay? So you know your controllables. Now, a really good thing to do is pick 3 things. So I really like effort, I like attitude, and you can pick something else. Obviously, jiu-jitsu related, like we use competitiveness, but you could use just effort and attitude. And at the end of every week, score yourself out of 10. Okay? How was my attitude this week? How was my effort towards that task? And then the final thing to do is ask yourself this question. Has my training this week taken me one step further towards that goal? And what you've done is you've got 3 markers of feedback across the training week, and that'll allow you to assess and adjust. And all of those things can be relatable to the elements that you can control. So whatever the thing is, whether it is something life related, whether it is your relationship, whether it is the fucking your kids or what training, whatever it is, those three things are applicable within those areas. So your attitude towards the task, your effort towards the task, and did your intervention take you one step closer towards being better at that task? And you've just created a really simple feedback loop that manages your controllables. They're specific to an intention or a goal or a reason why for doing things. And they provide you with real-time data that's relative to you that you can make adjustments on and improve upon. And there's your free feedback.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really nice point to end on, because ultimately what we're saying here is there are very big bits of low-hanging fruit that exist for people to improve, regardless of what level they are actually at. And that this bigger picture stuff is often completely missed for, oh, well, I can't do it because my gym doesn't do ecological, or I can't do it because we don't do leg locks at our place, or, you know, I can't train 6 days a week. And while all of those things might be true, it doesn't mean that there aren't very simple changes that you can make just on your level and see what you're capable of as a result.
Yeah. A lot of the evolution in training, and whether it's a technical model, like we've obviously instructionals are massive in jiu-jitsu, whether it's whatever, I can't even think of an example, whether it's nutritional strategies, whether it's training strategies, whether it's technical strategies, all of these things have come from somebody simply managing the things that they can do. So it literally is that. So someone has an idea of something that they want to get better at, and then they just apply themselves in a manner and reflect on it. That's all it is. Like, whether it's Danaher and his leg lock system, all that came from was seeing a gap in the market, applying himself within a manner, and building a system off it. Like, whatever it is, it just, whether it's a training method, whether it's like big things like, no one will know this, but like kabuki bars and strength conditioning, like whether you think they have value or not, all that came from was somebody's intention, and then went, fuck it, I'm just going to steer into this, I'm going to try it, I'm going to test it, I'm going to apply it. How can I manage those things? Now, what a lot of the time in those cases are, those controllables are managed out of subconsciously. People are just applying themselves with a lot of intent towards something they're trying to get better at. But sometimes we as individuals have to take conscious control of ourselves and, like you said, recognize, call our own bullshit, essentially, and be like, no, I could do this better, or I need to do this better. That wasn't that great today. Why was it not that great? Okay, what can I do about it? And it's that simple.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, that's probably a really nice note to end it on. So, as we do every week, we haven't... Oh, Bailey hasn't made an appearance.
He's actually behaved himself.
Oh, well, he made an appearance earlier before we were recording.
He's currently fast asleep. oh no, I think he's just heard his name called. He's just woken up. He's having a stretch. It's nearly his dinner time, so he'll be getting excited.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll leave it there for people. As always, if you've got questions, if you want any feedback yourself, or you've got any ideas off the back of this, please, if you're watching it on YouTube, you can put it in the comments below. If you're listening to it on Spotify, I think you can comment. I don't know how modern things work.
I don't know how Spotify works either.
Or you can email us, and the email will be below. And yeah, essentially, you can also get hold of both of us on our Instagrams. I'm getstrong.rollmore, because I'm imaginative like that. Andrew is
just brother performance,
show off.
Another imaginative person.
Performance, who'd have thought it?
I know.
Yeah, and essentially you can get us on there. We are also both by trade strength and conditioning coaches, and we're both pretty good at it. So you could also hire us to do that for you and let us take care of all of the controllables that you don't want to have to worry about.
I'll tell you what I'll do, Dave. I'm going to be a nice person again. I actually have a webinar on the topic of controllables. Ooh. And if you've made it to the end of this and you would like that, I will send it you for free. Just drop me a message and tell me you've listened to the podcast. And I'll know you've listened because you'll have made it to the end. So
yeah, you'll have messaged.
you'll deserve a prize. So if you do get to the end of this and you want the webinar, I will send it you for free. And that's
Lovely.
it. I think
well,
that's probably a good place to
have a
call it.
webinar, and if you message me about it, you can't have it because it doesn't exist, and I'll send you to Andrew instead.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, it's been a pleasure.
Right. Nice one, buddy.
Right.
As
Take
always.
it easy, mate. Yeah,
See ya.
you too. See you later.